Thank you. It is so good to be here. It's been a long time. So good morning, Foothill Center for Spiritual Living. What I want to tell you is that I'm just grateful for Reverend Suzanne for inviting me. And I have been here, but it was a distant past. It was about 12 years ago. I would drive up for Wednesday night meditation. I was invited by 3 practitioners who were part of my practitioner class. And you might remember them, or you might not. But it was that invitation that made the difference. They invited me to drive up to this community, and I would chant, and I would pray, and I would sing my heart out. So for very long, and even as I come up the hill today, I think that this is a very loving, and a very calm, and a very welcoming community. And I know that right now, this community is in transition. I know that you're setting intentions, envisioning who you would like to come forward as your new senior minister. But I'd like to tell you that 1 year ago, this very month, in my own spiritual community, we were preparing to say goodbye to our founding minister, our senior minister, Reverend Georgia. She wanted to retire, how dare her. For our community, it was a time of uncertainty and anxiousness. It was excitement. But there were also feelings of grief and of perceived loss. We were wondering, who would we become as a community? However, the departure facilitated a new vision of who we could be. And a year later, we have a new senior minister, and we're taking the best part of our past, and we're taking the best part and moving it into the future, and we're still building new and wonderful and varied experiences as we move forward. A year later, we are still evolving, and we will be ever evolving. So I believe that's true with your community. So think of this in-between time, this bridge time. Think of it as a gap. This is a time when you plant the seed. This is a time that provides you with the gift of co-creating and visioning the future of your community. Treasure this time and know that as you set your intentions, so you will evolve. So I'm happy to be with you in this moment of infinite possibilities, this moment of co-creation. I'm happy to be a bridge to that larger community of the Centers for Spiritual Living and speak with you today on CSL's monthly theme of embracing self-care. Embracing self-care is the monthly theme for June. And specifically today, it's about balancing self-care and grief. So the spiritual principle that I'm working with today is that we believe in the eternality, the immortality, and the continuity of the individual soul forever and ever expanding. And though we may perceive something as a loss, we know deep inside that it all transforms. And I know that God is always and ever present in every situation. So what I'd like to say is that in times of joy, in times of grief, in times of loss, Spirit, God, infinite intelligence, it's always there. It's there on the sunny day, and it's there deep in the midnight hour. And if God is in the midst of it, then good is in the midst of it. So today I'm going to examine loss, its relationship to grief, or perceived loss, and its relationship to grief, and how to hold this paradox of grief and joy together, and how self-care can lead us out of despair and back into what I'm going to call right relationship with God, self, and others. Now, loss. When I think of loss in the general sense, I think of the transition of a person, a pet, or an event in your life. That is it's a transition. It's a transmutation into a greater expression. Now, I found that loss is defined in common terms when something meaningful is taken away. So a loss could be a death, it could be a divorce, it could be a disease that changes the way you navigate life. And we in California know full well that loss could be the loss of a home to a wildfire, or it could be the loss of a minister due to retirement and moving on. But loss is the perception, the human perception, that the event, the person, or the thing that has deep meaning in your life is no longer there. But Ernest Holmes says this about loss. He tells us what it's really all about. He says, it is human to grieve over the loss of our dear ones. We love them and cannot help missing them. But a true realization of the immortality and the continuity of the individual soul, it will rob us of our grief. It will rob us of our hopelessness. Oh, we realize that they are in God's keeping and they are safe. So we view eternity from a higher standpoint than how we experience it. Realizing this, we shall see everyone as a budding genius, a becoming God, an unfolding soul, an eternal destiny. That is what we believe. We believe in that immortality and continuity of the individual soul, ever expanding. And although you know it to be true, you know it to be true in your head, there's these little things called emotions that rip through your heart. So I know that when I get the news of some event, some person, or something changing, that my consciousness first goes to sadness and grief. Maybe not for the person, but for the loss of their physical presence in my everyday life, for the loss of familiar interactions. You know, it is our perception of loss that is the trigger that leads to grief. Grief is a reaction to a perceived loss. Grief is a range of emotions that you have when you experience loss, and it's different for everyone. It could be anything from overeating to not eating at all, from staying really busy to sitting on your couch and spacing out. It comes in waves. It comes sometimes expectedly, like on a birthday or an anniversary, or sometimes it comes unexpectedly when you hear a song or smell a certain scent, and it takes you right back to that mental place of being with that person or that pet. But however, this experience, this perception of loss is human, and it's firmly planted in race consciousness. It would be what the Buddhists refer to as the first noble truth. The Buddhists say, everyone's suffering, everyone suffers, and that suffering is a part of the world. It is a human experience. Now, I'm going to define suffering as attachment to people, things, and familiarity. But in the Science of Mind text, Ernest says, the universe does not demand suffering. Suffering is man-made, and someday we shall decide that we have had enough of suffering. So along your grief journey, you will decide, and forgive me for this, to accept the things you cannot change, to change the things you can, and to turn to divine intelligence to know the difference. So the emotion of grief, the conditions come when we feel helpless and hopeless to change a situation, or when we lose someone or something, or when an event changes our lives. In the grieving state, we believe there's a separation between ourselves and others. We believe there's a separation between ourselves and God. We can feel alone and lonely. And so the road to healing is in reestablishing our connection to the divine, to our physical self, and to our community. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes for me it takes a total shake-up. It takes a change in our everyday foundation to make a change in our lives. Rumi reminds us that the wound is the place where the light enters you. What we perceive as loss can provide a new way of seeing life. Loss allows us to reframe our experiences and see that they're moving us forward, physically, spiritually, mentally. Loss can be an opportunity for us to strengthen our spiritual muscles in a way that we can gain our lives. But I'm going to tell you, at the beginning of the grief journey, these insights may not happen, but they will happen after a while. After a while, with some distance, after some anger, some denial, some acceptance, some perspective. We will move from grief to healing. We will move from a feeling of separateness back to the realization of our wholeness, back into a place of connection with divine, with others, and with ourselves. And the healing process looks different for everyone. But one way to heal, one real serious way to heal, is to tell your grief story and to reframe that story as time goes on, as one that will acknowledge the love and the joy and the lessons learned. Kimberly Pittman Schultz wrote a book called Grieving Us, a field guide for living with loss without losing yourself. And Pittman says, our lost story is the bridge back to ourselves, a healing tool. And in her diary, in August of 2003, she wrote, it is not gravity that grounds us, keeping us from spinning off into a black night sky. It's love stories, some of them happy, others hard. Love isn't always kind, though it wants to be. Love isn't always kind, though it wants to be. Even in death, the story says, I still love you. So I want to tell you about a grief story that I have. Many years ago, I had a colleague at work who I loved like a brother. His name was Robert. We would talk about the ups and downs of life. We would take walks. We would check in with one another. And even though he was the university's lawyer, you can love lawyers. And I was running a statewide youth program. At times, and many times, it felt like our connection at work was very much like the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. Complete with that lunch break, you know, when they take off the armor and they sit next to each other and they go, hey, how's the kids? He goes, yeah, kids are fine, how's kids? But then you go right back to work and you're right back in that same position, right? It felt like that sometimes. But I do recall when a subtle shift started in our check-ins and our walks, and he began to inquire about my health. And he began to warn me to take care of myself, not let things get out of control. He'd also give me advice on my latest love interest. We won't talk about that. But as the weather turned cooler, the walks kind of tapered off. And it was months later, over the Thanksgiving holiday. You know, Robert didn't return to work that Monday after that long holiday. He died unexpectedly during the weekend. When I returned to work on Monday, I had a premonition over the weekend, and my premonition was my brother died. Well, there were two people that I called my brother at work, healthy or not, that's the way it was. And so when I saw the person who I thought had died sitting happily at their desk, I shook off that feeling relieved. What was that all about? But then I got the call from his office. And when I got the call, I was strong. I was very strong. My other work colleagues knew how close we were, and they were all kind of concerned about me because I released no tears, just disbelief. You know, I was very professional. It wasn't until the very day of the memorial celebration. I tell you, it was when the light hit his photo just right, when his son's soccer team came and gave their regards and spoke about him as a coach. You know, they all came in uniform. And then there was that song by Hezekiah Walker, I Need You to Survive. I need you to survive. That's when I lost it. I think of Robert every time I hear that song. During his memorial service, big tears, old tears streamed down my face in front of my university staff and colleagues. And that wall that was holding back the emotions gave way to the floodgates. It broke. Wasn't very professional, not very private, grieving out loud. And though Robert was not a true family member of mine, he was someone I saw every single day, and I loved him like a brother. And still some days I do miss his sage advice. And self-care, immortality, the eternality of life, let's just say they were not top of mind back then. I didn't even know the science of mind teachings. Grief, according to Elizabeth Lesser, in Broken Open, How Difficult Times Can Help Us Grow. Elizabeth says, and you may agree or disagree, but Elizabeth says, grief is the proof of our love, a demonstration of how deeply we have allowed another to touch us. However, when you're in the throes of grieving, it's easy to lose yourself in the situation. So during my time of not allowing myself tears, I wasn't engaged in self-care. I was in shock. But it wasn't until I allowed myself to grieve that I could even begin a self-care journey. So if you're going through something now, I suggest that the first step in this loss journey, I'm going to call it a loss journey, is simply to allow yourself to grieve. Have grace with yourself. Ride the waves of emotion. Say quietly to yourself, I know God is present in this situation. I know that God is present as I process my grief. Take your grief, your frustration, your anger, and place it on the altar. Go into that secret high place. Go into what Mahalia Jackson called the upper room. Go in there and speak and talk to the divine. You know, there was a Broadway show that said, my arms are too short to box with God. Box it out. Let that inner space happen. And when you do, you actually gain a deeper and a greater acceptance. You gain peace and you gain release. And in time, the situation will transmute or transform itself. Robert and my last conversations were around self-care. And after I processed the shock of loss, eventually self-care became more important to me. And living life to its fullest almost became a commandment. It didn't happen at the time, but it came later. So there are many gifts that I got from that relationship, many insights and many wisdoms. But it all unfolded after the release of emotion, after the acceptance of the events. You know, it's one thing to know in your head. It's one thing to know that we are taught that life is eternal, that we are born and that we are never born and we never die. But we have to know this at a deeper level, in our heart and in our soul. But as we walk through these stages of grief, eventually there are lessons learned. And there's this eternal thread of love that is there. And the pain can be transformed into a sweet memory. I was reminded in thinking about this that love doesn't end with loss. Maybe there's somebody out here that needs to hear that today. Love does not end with loss. If you're in a situation where you got unexpected news or life is shifted in some way, surrender to love. Surrender to that feeling of being loved. Surrender to that feeling of giving love and of receiving love. And just stay there for a moment, surrounding yourself with the love force of life. It may be difficult to remember that God is always there. God is ever present in every situation. But God is love. That steadfast, eternal energy, and it will carry you through. Now, when I thought of this community, and I thought of grief and loss, somehow poetry just bubbled up. And it was William Stafford's poem. I don't know if many of you know it. It's called The Way It Is. It was published in 1999, and it talks about that thread. So it's very short. I want to share with you William Stafford's poem, The Way It Is. The way it is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer or get old. But nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. That thread, that is the energy, that is the life force. That is how I experience God. And as you move along the spectrum of emotions, we can realize that grief is an energy that is included in our expression of wholeness, and that grief and loss often lead to spiritual growth. But the most important activity you can do with grief is to not do a spiritual bypass. A spiritual bypass prevents you from acknowledging what you are feeling. It distances you from yourself and others. It creates separation, not true, authentic connection. So now I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I know it'll depend on who's addressing you, but but at least face the truth in the privacy of your own home. For this exercise, let's say it's a practitioner, a trusted friend, someone in this community. They ask you how you are. Your pet just died. You're feeling lonely and upset. Do you say, all is well? No, that's a spiritual bypass. Let's try another one. You just got diagnosed with cancer. You're feeling angry and confused. Someone asks you how you are. Do you say, all is well? No, another spiritual bypass. Your mother has dementia and failing health, and you are an overexhausted caregiver. Do you say, all is well? You've just filed for divorce. You're angry, you're confused, you don't know what the future holds. Do you say, all is well? And finally, your job just laid you off, reduced your hours. You don't know how you're going to make the mortgage payment. Do you say, all is well? No. When these situations occur, face them head on. When these situations occur, talk to your minister, talk to your practitioner. A spiritual bypass is pretending that things are fine when they're clearly not okay. When grief knocks you off your feet, and I don't know about you, but it knocks me off my feet, it's a wake-up call from the divine. It's an opportunity for healing. It's time for prayer. So I'll tell you, just 2 years ago, on summer solstice, a beautiful night, I found myself in the emergency room with a saddle pulmonary embolism. Oh, I did a spiritual bypass on myself. Leading up to that visit, I kept saying, there's somebody here that can testify to that. I'm okay. I just want to sit still for a couple more days. You know, I was in denial, that river of denial, and it almost cost me my life. Finally, when I couldn't deny it any longer, and the pain became excruciating, and the breathing became so labored, I found myself in the ICU for almost a week. And I was not sure about life and death. And they say if you don't be still, God will force you to be still. God forced me to be still. But even in the ICU, and I don't know what this says about me, judge not. But even in the ICU, when I had to lay really still because there was this stent going up to my heart, breaking up the blood clots. I had on this very fashionable yellow smock. And I asked my partner to bring me my something to wrap my hair with. And she brought me this beautiful yellow and green scarf. And so I wrapped my hair with this beautiful yellow and green scarf. It matched perfectly with my yellow smock. And I said to her, I am the most fashionable person on the ICU. Really, they should be here. So I made a little joke about being the best dressed. But it was a moment of joy. It was a moment of joy in the midst of grief. When I left the intensive care ward and went back into the world, I still wasn't okay. I questioned, why did I have this experience? Like, why did I have not just a pulmonary embolism, that'd be one thing, but like a saddle pulmonary embolism in both lungs. And I questioned this near-death experience. I questioned, why did I have to face the end of my physical being? And even though it strengthened my faith, it sent me into a deep dive about life and the purpose of life. So my self-care healing journey began because I needed to take a pause. I needed to step back, to rest, and to talk to a therapist. I had to face what happened. I had to face, why did I take so long? Why did I sit on the couch for 3 days? I couldn't brush over the experience. That journey was one of rest. It was one of therapy, talking to a psychologist. It was taking time off from a daily routine. It was walking. It was renewing my daily gratitude practice. It was literally stopping and smelling the roses. And I did. I grieved. I grieved the changes in my body. And I came out of that experience with greater purpose, deeper understanding, and deeper appreciation of the ability to sing. That was my connection with Foothills. I came here and I sang my heart out. But when you can't even catch your breath, singing something so simple, I just remember when I was able to sing again, I was so happy. So when you go through the fire, when you go through grief, when you go through loss, when you go through unexpected change, it's in those times that you can be propelled into your greater yet to be moment. So it's hard to believe, but a separation or a divorce can propel you into your heart's desire. Just saying. An illness can support you in rekindling friendships, or maybe it'll deepen your compassion for others. And grief and loss, or perceived loss, can help you see the world differently. You just have to discover the gift that is wrapped in grief. Grief feels like the other side of joy, but grief and joy can coexist at the same time. So when we calm those waves of emotion, when we settle into the quiet, it is then that we can tap into those small glimmers of joy, those small breakthroughs of peace. And it's those small breakthroughs, one by one, that leads you out of grief. Don't feel guilty for feeling the life impulse run through you. Let it flow. Let it flow. I will not sing. May Sarton, in her book Silence Now, her poem, After a Long Illness, captures those glimmers of joy that one can find if you open your heart. So the final poem I want to share with you is May Sarton's After a Long Illness. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. 2 geese, 4 ducks along the shore. They are the sight I always look for. Crossing the causeway on my way to town, they are exotic geese, each with a crest. 2 ducks, 2 mallard and 2 white. Sometimes the ducks are upside down, rumps up, beaks nibbling for fodder. Sometimes the geese are preening feather. But always what I hope for most is when they swim in a single line, floating the tide, always together. Clearly connected in their varied scheme, this This is the sight I love best. But whatever they do and wherever they are, in whatever brilliant or gloomy weather, they rinse my eyes on my way to town. What, after all, brings joyful release? After a long illness, after near despair, better than 4 ducks and 2 geese. So if by chance they are not there, I am cross in the empty of joy air, and I feel deprived and suddenly alone, driving too fast now, cold to the bone. May Sarton. She wrote that. So joy and grief residing simultaneously, one moment leading to the next, that emphasis on connection that we have to the greater world. You know, I had to look up the word scheme, and in the line it says they're clearly connected by the very scheme. It means a few things, but what it really means is that V formation, that ducks fly. I think of it as that invisible divine intelligence connection. So one way to embrace self-care is to recognize your connection to others, to join others who have experienced what you may be going through. Grief circles, healing circles, and I wrote this before I knew it, and even drum circles. It's a form of self-care. And you've got an opportunity to do that if you need to on this summer solstice with this community. Embracing self-care while grieving is to find those moments of connection, those glimmers of joy. Self-care is anything you can do to take care of yourself physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. It will benefit your physical, spiritual, and emotional health and well-being. And research says that it fosters resilience, living longer, more positive health outcomes, and can help manage stress. So if you're still not sure what to do, I'll just give you a small list of things you can do. A regular sleeping routine. It sounds easy. This is it. It sounds easy, but doing it might take a minute. A regular sleeping routine, eating healthy, spending time in nature, doing a hobby that you enjoy, like gardening or painting, and expressing your gratitude. Here's the one, asking for help when you need it. You know, self-care can look different for everyone, but to count as self-care, the behavior should promote health and happiness for you. It should awaken the joy within you. It should awaken that feeling of connection, that feeling of eternality, that feeling of love, that feeling of goodness. So no matter what's going on right now, no matter what you're experiencing, God is in the midst of it. God is in the midst of the spiritual community's evolution. God is in the midst of illness. God is in the midst of loss and separation. God is there in the bright sunshine and in the midnight hour. And if God is there, love is there. And love binds it all. So by honoring yourself, taking care of that very essence of yourself, you honor God. You honor the part of God that is within you. And it slowly expands and breaks through, and sadness and grief give way to acceptance and joy. So it is.
Yeah.
I do have an affirmation, and then I'm going to say a short prayer. So the affirmation I'd like you to say with me is that I know that God, or love, however you feel, I know that God is present through my grief and in my joy. God is present in every situation. So let's say it together. I know that God is present through my grief and in my joy. God is present in every situation. So let me just do a short prayer. So just knowing that there's only one power behind all, and it is the power of love, it is the power of joy, it's the power of connection, it's that infinite intelligence that is all good, and knowing that I am in that goodness, that I am surrounded by that goodness, that goodness is in and around and through me, and that goodness is in and around and through each and every person here, and I'm just speaking my word that whatever situation is unfolding, that it is unfolding, that is moving forwards to the highest and the best evolution is moving towards good in the lives of each and every person that can hear my voice, that there is healing, that there is joy, that there is love, that life is lived to its fullest. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for the human experience of grief. I'm so grateful for the gifts of grief. I'm so grateful for the expansion, for the movement, for the community, and for the recognition of the divine as the center of life. And together we say, I release this word into the law, and together we say,
and so it is.
So it is. Thank you.